Hello and welcome to Muse Jam Session Recording 156. My name is Dani Beaumont and I'm a product manager on the Adobe Muse team. I am joined by nobody at the moment from the team, but we usually will have some folks. There are some friendly faces from the community that I'm seeing. So y'all are officially in charge of chat. If you're one of my regulars, just give me a hand here. I'm going to go ahead and change our layout real quick. And if you have not done so, answering the polling questions on the right is terrific. It helps me know how y'all are doing. Additionally, in the lower right area, this is where if you think you've got a question that is specific to what I'm covering today, it's a great place to put it there in the lower right. If it's a general question, have at it. Just put it in the chat, and either folks from the team or some of my more experienced users will jump in and give you an answer. But specific to glorious galleries today, please go ahead and use that presenter area in the lower right section. All right, I am going to begin sharing my screen. What you will notice, middle of the screen there on the left-hand side is a link. I've got a URL that points to my meeting notes for today, and I'm going to keep that URL live. Let's just see here. Let me go ahead and add it into the SharePod so that I have it down the road. But these will be the session notes that we're going to cover during our session today. So the topic for today's session is on galleries, glorious galleries. And in the resources area, as usual, I've done some poking around a little bit. Let's get this thing set up totally right here before we go much further. So what I've done is my usual. I've got some best practices articles in the community that I've found. Can't say it enough, one of my favorite aspects of Muse is as a designer, you don't have to worry about the code. The Muse team does. And in some ways you may say that doesn't give you the flexibility you would have as a hand coder. I think it takes you a long, long way towards adopting trends on the web without having to focus on how to code them out. So many of the articles that I am pointing to here talk about how you would download jQuery plugins or scripts for hand coders. For the most part, you want to ignore that part, but just look at the design best practices that they speak about when it comes to galleries. So for the most part, a gallery is, let's just kind of jump into one here. I kind of selected this one from Site of the Day this week because I think it's kind of a very classic wonderful example of how you can put a whole lot of information into one constrained space. So this is a portfolio website. We hate to be too redundant on Site of the Day, but the honest truth is the majority of the well-designed sites that come across Site of the Day are portfolio websites. And I think being Adobe, that makes a lot of sense, whatever your core competency is. In this instance, it has to do with a print product. So this designer does a lot with print, but wants to have a portfolio of his work. His name is Ian, and it's a terrific way to show print, to show illustration, to show video, to show sound content, this idea of a portfolio. But when you have lots of information, one thing that's really important is how are people able to navigate your site? How can they understand all of the content you're presenting without getting lost? And there are subtle ways within Muse that you can put all of this information. That's some of what we're going to tear into today. But if we look at Ian's portfolio here, notice I can roll over an object and see more information about it. So I'm first presented with just the visual content. In the over state here, I have text. So I can see the description, decide if I want to click in on it. If I do actually click in onto this item in the portfolio, we'll give it a second to load. What you'll notice is I get some nice detailed here. You guys saying audio is choppy. I'm not sure what's funny today. If it's Connect, I can't do anything about it. If it's my mic, it'd be nice to know, but I'm probably going to have to keep going. If everybody thinks it's choppy, go ahead and put that in the chat and attack me. But if only a few folks, it may be your internet connection. All right, I'm going to forge ahead. So, lots of choppy. Okay, well then let's pause for a minute. And I can try to do a little bit of a test. So bear with me. All right, so fingers crossed that audio is a little cleaner at this point. I'm using everything I always use, but the demo gods might be playing with me. Notice in this portfolio, again, I really like it because there's a couple things to keep in mind. All right, good, fingers crossed. Notice as I scroll down here, I've got the description is persistent, so it is pinned. It is not moving after a certain point. Chances are it's by way of scroll effects, because notice that it scrolls for a moment and then it pins. And then I've got different images that I can look for this project. Now the reality is, when it comes to design, Ian here may have 3 images, he may have 13. And this design allows him to do 2 across when need be, or 1 across, or 3 across, but grow the height based on his content. Another thing I love is persistent navigation. So at any time I can just jump to the next item in the portfolio by clicking here. It's going to take me to his next design where I get that next description. Or I can click back out to the main site and choose visually from the thumbnails that he's provided. So really good example of very subtle integration of galleries into his design. Now, Ian submitted this to Site of the Day, and as part of that, he submitted his source content. So we're going to swing back and look at how he built this site out, but I'm going to step back for a minute and kind of go through some of the basics before that. So let's go into Muse. Here's Ian's site. I'm going to go back out, though, to a working project that I want to use here to kind of keep my eye on things. So let's begin with some of the built-in widgets within Adobe Muse and talk about the pros and cons with them. And then we'll look at some of the third-party widgets that are available to you in the widget directory that we offer. So, okay, starting with the basics of a slideshow. Again, many of you said you know Muse pretty well, so some of this may be pretty obvious, but it's still worth talking about. I'm going to come into the widget library, and there are a series of widgets here. And for those of you that come to these sessions, you know that I say that any one widget in a category can be configured to be another widget in a category. So when you're designing, you really need to kind of have a decision tree for a moment and really think through the requirements of a gallery you might be working with. Because there is sort of a crossroads you have to, a fork in the road that you have to take. Do you want to use a composition widget to create your slideshow or your gallery, or do you want to use a slideshow widget? Advantages of each, and I'll kind of talk through that. I'm going to come into the slideshow options here, and I'll just choose a basic slideshow. As I mentioned, I can always configure any of these other attributes based on the same widget. Now by default, I drag that onto the canvas, and I'm presented with options. I can have, as you'll notice here, a caption for this design. I can have a previous and next button. I can have a counter, and they're all handled pretty well. They're all very well automated. I have the ability to come in and define what is the transition between those objects. I can use a horizontal or a vertical swipe. I can fade between images and set the frequency of that fade. It's all pretty straightforward. Notice that when I come to place objects in the hero, the larger area, or the thumbnail, if thumbnails were visible, I can decide if it's going to fill the frame proportionately or fit the content proportionately. Fill frame is always good. What that means is it's going to chop off either height or width to make sure that it always fits the shape of the container. But you do end up with some cropping. So if you need to always have 100% of your image showing, you're going to want to fit the content, and it'll fill with a background in the area that does not fit the container. But with that set now, I can come in and add my own images. So for this design, I'm going to just hit Command D or place, and I've gone in and grabbed a couple of starter images that I'm going to work with here. I've got backgrounds. And I'll go ahead and select all 4 of these and click Open. You notice I get the Place Gun tool here. And it says that I have 4 images on that gun. I can just click and release in the hero image, and it's going to automatically replace the images with what I've just added. Another way I could have done that is just under Slideshow Options, add the image by clicking on the folder and browsing for those images. Now the default state of widgets from Muse these days is one where as you add images, it's going to delete the default images. That's sort of a trick we've implemented for these starter widgets in the widget gallery, or in the widget panel. Everything is not a gallery, you know. And now that I've done that, let's just kind of look at a few of the options that I have. If I bring up thumbnails, notice I've got a set of thumbnails here. The key behind widgets is always to know how deeply you're clicking and how shallow. So as I click, you'll notice I'm at a page level here. I'm going to click once to select the overall slideshow, click a second time to select the thumbnails, and I can press and drag those around as a group. Now we added the ability to break these apart so that they don't have to be in the same container, but some rules still apply, which is that thumbnails need to, in a slideshow, they have to always match the full image. So we do not have the ability with a slideshow to come in and change this to a different view than, well, let's click on the right one here. So this is going to always be a small thumbnail version of this image. That's kind of a slideshow rule. But they align and they work well together. I can come into this set. Notice that by default when I click on it, Edit Together is checked, which means that if I decide to come and change one thumbnail here, perhaps I want it to be longer, notice that what I do to one sibling, one element at that level is going to apply to all of the elements, so I can press and drag in that way. I can always come up and make my container larger if I want. And then other things that are not necessarily apparent for how you can affect them is, let's say I don't like the spacing here. I want it to be less or greater. I always have to fiddle a little bit here to get this right. So I'm going to go under Window and bring up the spacing panel, which is already open there. Notice that there's a default gutter set to 10 by 10. If I wanted to decrease that, I might decide that a gutter of 5 by 5 makes a lot more sense. Obviously, the vertical is only going to apply if I have a stack of thumbnails, but I can control the spacing in that way. And to do that, keep in mind, this is kind of confusing. If I come in and grab one thumbnail or select all the thumbnails, the spacing panel gutter area is disabled. It's kind of hard to understand why that is. You can't press and drag to separate them. What you want to do is make sure you hit Escape or step up one level in the widget so that I've selected the thumbnail container group, and that allows me to come in and change my gutter space. Another thing I can do with the thumbnails, the only way that I can do it, is if I want to reorder my reorder my slideshow, I do it by way of the thumbnail set. So even if you don't intend to include thumbnails in your finished design, you're going to want to view them so that you can move items around. So I'll come in here, and let's say I want to balance the color here. It goes from blue to yellow, yellow, blue. I may decide to just break it up a little by selecting a thumbnail here, and notice as I drag it, I get a blue line. There's the blue line between the first and second spots. If I come over to this area, I can drag it to the far end. So I now have blue, yellow, and that is going to affect the sequence of the playing of my slideshow images. Another thing I can do with slideshows is select the hero image area here. And notice that when it's selected appropriately, so I'm at the hero level, I can come in and define that as a 100% width object. All right, so Muse gets a little upset when I do that. I have to drag my thumbnails back a little bit. But I now have something that's going to span the width of the site. I could even come in and make my hero area a little larger and include my navigation. It looks pretty good where it is right here. I'm going to let it stay there. But by default, that navigation is going to just kind of float. If in my own mind I decide I want it to be a fixed width from, let's say, the bottom corner of my window, what I can do is select all of these objects. When you click them, they actually activate the slideshow. And I'm going to go ahead and set them a certain distance in and from the bottom of my page. Now I've got a little wonkadoo going on here. Let's see. I'm going to go ahead and define it in relationship to the top of my site instead. So I've selected this object, and I'm going to think in terms of the top of my website right here, and I want to set the distance down and the distance in for these objects. So now when I pin these containers, these components, I'm going to pin them in relationship to the upper left-hand corner of my browser. It's kind of hard to imagine, but the distance here and the distance in is now set. What this allows me to do, and pinning probably won't work, I'll show you why. One of the other goals I have is to be able to have scrollable content at the bottom. So let me show you why pinning is a bad way to do that, and then we'll come back and do it the right way. So I'm going to preview in browser. First off, I have my slideshow here at the top, and I have this 100% width object here. So as I press and drag, notice that it's scaling to fill the container. If I make my container a very odd shape, it's going to continue to just scale the photo so that no matter what, it will fill the browser. My thumbnails are not scaling to fill, and we do not use responsive in our design here. So the alternate layout, in essence, the desktop layout, is going to be fixed in width in this area. And I can come in and interact with my components here. I can set captions separately. So let's say I do want to have it such that if this were a taller page, let's go ahead and go into my page properties and make this taller. So I'll go ahead and set it to 2000 pixels in height. And if I look, I've got a much taller page. And now when I'm looking at my content, this is kind of a nice area. I obviously could refine it, but I've got slideshow to the top of my design, kind of a big trend going on. And as I scroll, everything moves out of its way. Well, I now have a problem. This is awfully nice because it's remaining fixed to this corner, but when I try to scroll down on the page, it sort of breaks. So we're going to take a different approach. This is one that I showed you in that site of the day example. I'm going to come in and select those objects. Let's get this so I can see what I'm doing without making everyone really dizzy. Okay. I'm going to come in and select these navigation components here, my previous and next, my counter. And instead of pinning it, I'm going to unpin it. What I want to do is use scroll effects. So I'm going to come into scroll effects, and with all of the objects selected, I can come in and, maybe I can't, she says. Let's try this again. Interesting. I may have backed into my own mess, which is why can I not apply scroll effects to slideshow elements? This is the teacher teaching the teacher. My own mistake, but this may be one of the limitations of slideshows, which is that I cannot apply scroll effects to slideshow elements. And this is a little bit of legacy. Slideshows have been around since Muse 1.0. We've improved it over time. But there is an idea of being able to break apart every aspect of a slideshow and be able to have it be more dynamic, more flexible, to allow widget developers to get in there and customize attributes. I've just backed myself into one shortcoming with slideshows, I think, which is that I cannot apply scroll effects to individual items. So I could pin the object, and I could work around it in that way. Or, as you'll see, if I leave it alone here and keep it unpinned and preview it in the browser, it looks pretty good here. If I make things larger, notice how it's moving. It's not remaining to the side there. So it kind of bothers me a little bit, but that's one of the limitations for the default version of this slideshow. Let's say I wanted to do this same work and I want to have more flexibility. Another example of a limitation for this implementation is, let's say I wanted to have kind of a call to action, such that when users come in and click on this guy, I want to have a nice little panel here that allows me to have them link to go to another page, allows them to play a video with a little video player. Slideshow widget by default does not do any of that. It does not allow you to nest elements inside of one another. So I'm a little bit stuck there. One thing that slideshow does do in relationship to our composition widget, that's where we're headed, the other way you'll do slideshows, is I can take advantage of a full screen slideshow that will fill the entire back area. So for that, I'm going to come into my options here, and I'm going to click on full screen. Now, go ahead and keep an eye on what happens here. It's a little odd and takes a while to learn about it. But I've got thumbnails on top. I've got some navigation here. When I say full screen, Muse goes in and implements full screen. Now you might say to yourself, what the heck just happened to my thumbnails? And you would be justified in saying that. If I zoom on out and make things much smaller, there they are hanging out up on top. So they get bumped, they get shoved up, The navigation elements here got to stay, but my thumbnails pretty much fell off the top of the screen. So I'm going to go ahead and bring those back into view. And let's just take a quick look at the behavior we have now. So what I get is my navigation, again, is sitting over here, and my thumbnails are here. But what effectively happens is my background now is going to fill the browser window. And if we go back to this design, again, we're going to dissect this guy a little bit, not that guy. Let's go back to Ian's work and go back to, actually, no, I think I have another one I do want to show here. Bear with me. This is another site that I thought was pretty terrific, the MHD partnership. And this is one that we have source content for. I like it because it's incredibly subtle, but it's incredibly full and rich in its implementation. So what the designer did here is used full screen slideshows in the background. Overlaid on top is a kind of nice navigation widget here. I think this is probably a cookie widget that's using just nice smooth transitions to open and close the navigation, but it's showing the pages on the site. So I'm on the home page, and notice even on this home page, I've got an element here that is, let's just take a look. So this is doing the magic that I'm seeking. Maybe I can learn from this user how to get there. I've got the MHD partnership, and it is pinned in relationship to the lower corner of the screen. It's also pinned to the side. I can page through sort of these very large hero award images here. If I want to come in and look at greater detail, let's say I want to go to, let's just see here. I'm going to go into About Us. Notice that I still have this nice full screen slideshow playing in the background, but I have an overlay of detail. So the most important thing for this client is their images, the work that they've done. And at the same time, I can overlay other bits of information. They've got a send file interface here. They've got a contact us area. And notice with that contact us area, as I come into the page, I have basically a tabbed panel that I can click between to either contact them or find them. But the slideshow, their artwork, is filling the full screen in that way. So that's pretty consistent with the approach we're taking here. I can do full screen slideshows with the slideshow, but then I do have some of those limitations. Let's say I wanted to do that MHD method because I just don't learn from my mistakes here. Let's go back here. You know how there's this MHD partnership? I could, let's just grab, let me see if I can be really lazy. I'm going to copy this image just to show you guys quickly the approach that's taken. Now in that design, chances are that is put at a master level. I'm going to come in and just paste it here. And what I'll do is probably a pretty bad thing. Let's just see if I give this a fill. And I'll give it a gradient. And we're going to go from, let's try light to dark instead. And I ruined it. Let's go in here. All right, again, when Dani tries to design, the world starts to cry. So we're going to keep this one. I want it in relationship to my browser here towards the bottom. I'm going to go ahead and let it touch the edge, even though that's bad design. And I'm going to pin it because the text is too close to the edge. But now when I preview in the browser, I'm starting to get that behavior. Now, let's try making sure we're at actual size. I'm going to move it over a little bit. So let's bring it down. It was a longer page than I thought. I'll put it right there. But what I have now is this floating element that as I page through my navigation, it's going to stay there. And when I resize my objects, it's going to not move. So I can't do that with captions with the slideshow, but I can do it for other elements that I've defined. So let's go in and sort of take a look at a very different way that you can approach some of these similar design elements. And that's going to be with the composition widget, or what we call trigger target. So if we take stock for a moment here, we have previous, next, we have a counter, we have captions, we have thumbnails, and we have objects that we want to have in a fixed position. Let's go ahead and leave this page alone. And let's go into making another one. Look at that composition widget. So I'm going to be quick because I don't want to take forever here. I'm going to go into the widget library. I'm going to come in and take a blank composition widget because I might as well start simple. I'm going to go in and clear a lot of the default attributes. So as it stands now, I have a trigger and a target. The trigger and the target can be anywhere that I want them to be. Let's go in and clear out the styling so that things are just much flatter. And let's go ahead and clear out all widget contents just to make sure it's pretty empty. I'm going to come in and show my edges here so that I can see where the heck the thing is now. But I get a thumbnail and a slideshow basically. So if I come into that image set, let's grab just the first one, and I'm going to click and release it into this container here. Now what I want to have happen, let's try that again. So I've got my trigger, I've got my target. Rather than placing the image into that container, I'm going to come in under fill, I'm going to add the image, and I'm going to have it scale to fill the container. So this way I can still come in and have this object become, let's say I want it to be 100% width object. Come in and select that guy. Let's move it into position right now. Notice that I didn't get a thumbnail when I did that. So this can be an advantage based on what you want to do. If I select this object, I'll come on in and I'm going to come in and add a fill image. I'm going to do that same image, but I have the ability to come on in there. I can say go ahead and scale to fill. I could double click on it, which can be a little frightening here. Let's see. Hold on. Take even a different approach. I'll come on in and I'm going to just place it. So here's my trigger container. I'll place that image. And I'm just going to press and drag it to be kind of large-ish here. And then I'm going to come on in and crop it. So it doesn't seem terribly relevant in this instance, but let's say I want to design the exact thumbnail look for my object. I have the ability to come in and play with my mask and my object as I'm working here. And then I can always drag it into the container. So if you don't like the thumbnails that are automatically generated, so iconically, this thumbnail may be a better representation of a very detailed, very large image. And because I have trigger targets, I have containers, I can control that. Another thing that's important is, let's say I brought these guys. Let's try to simulate our original design just to keep us on task here. So I've got my trigger and I've got my target. I could come into my container here, my target, and let's see. Let's make this guy a little larger. I've got scale to fill applied to it. And let's say that my call to action now, make this guy a little smaller. So because I'm a little nested here, I'm going to play with that. Notice I've got two elements here. I've got a container that's misbehaving. So you'll notice it's a lot more fiddly. It's not as automatic as having those thumbnails automatically generated, but I'm getting greater control. I could also come in and decide that in my states panel, let's bring that up. Okay, this new little floating palette action going on here. So in my states panel, notice with this object, I may decide, I've got normal, over, down, and active. I may decide that in the normal state, or let's say rollover state, we'll emulate what we've seen. I want to have a little call out footer area. So I'm going to draw it up first to make my life simple. I'll go ahead and come in with, did I lose audio with you guys? Hey there. Who hears audio, who doesn't? Okay. Okay. I'm going to keep mumbling. I'm sorry. If you can't hear me, try the YouTube recording in just a few hours. It can be internet connectivity. Okay, I'm going to keep talking. So for the normal state, let's say I decided I wanted to have this nice overlay. I can come in and create an overlay. I can make sure that the fill on that overlay has an opacity applied to it. So I might bring it down to 50%, and I might add a little bit of text in here, or not, depends on what I select. And we've got something playful, not high design, but it's hello world, people. Okay, so I've got some text here that I've placed in this area. What I can easily do now is say that, you know what, for this thumbnail, and the sizing might be off on this, in the rollover state, I want to grab these two elements and have it exist there. I'm going to be lazy about it, but I now have, if I click on this guy, my normal state, you know, I'm just designed to embarrass myself today. Maybe not. Ollie, bail me out. What you do tend to be able to do is, sometimes I think you invert this thing and it does tend to confuse me. Let's try it again. I'm going to play a little bit more, unless it's entirely gone. Okay, let's take these guys. Sometimes what you do is try to show the absence of something versus its full state. So what you could do is, if I come into normal, I can have an object that's there. I can roll over and have it just, in essence, disappear. So let's say I set this to 0. I'm just going to fail on this one. All right. But let's show the other example. But Dani, you walked away from that. I know I'm a little stumped. I've stumped my own self today. In my main area here, what I do want to do is add other calls to action. So I'm going to come in and create a container, round up some corners, go ahead and give it that fill, set my opacity to maybe 50%. Let's exaggerate the rounded corners, not that much. Let's try that. With that embarrassing text that's there, unused, we'll come and move this here. Hello world, click me. And click me can be a link, for example. And I can control the link states. So what I in essence get now is that slideshow behavior. I can add additional trigger targets. So you almost forget that I was trying to put an overlay on this, don't you? Totally out of sight, out of mind. I've got my first container and my second container instance. I'm going to come in and change my fill to be something different. And I'm going to also play with my thumbnail a little bit. I could be lazy if I want to leverage this. I'll copy my initial thumbnail. I'm going to drag it over here. Go ahead and change. Let's just come in and place that guy. Press and drag it. And again, I could play around with the crop to be something more in line with what I like for the shape. And pull this guy into position. It's going to end up making it larger. Can't say it enough that trigger targets are more powerful, but they take more fiddling. So notice that the second thumbnail, I need to refine it a little bit because the shape is off. But what I'm able to do now is come in and add click elements. So if I come and preview my work so far, got my first object, my second object. When I come to that first object, I can come and interact or click inside of it. I can come in, because we've sort of adapted both widgets to be more slideshow-like. You'll notice that I have stacked versus scattered. I could have the trigger and the target in different locations. I do have a lightbox behavior, such that if I enable that and come on into my design, by default I'm just getting the thumbnails. I can come in and view a lightbox mode for those guys by just clicking on that thumbnail, and it would overlay it. and there are configurable attributes to those as well. So let's go in and just take a quick look at the site that we were peeking at a little bit earlier that's using, well, let's just dissect it since I think I'm spooking myself on exactly what's being used on all of these sites. So for this particular design that we were looking at, I can come on in and take a look. We have the classic slideshow. So this is vanilla slideshow. You'll notice that there's no triggers, there's no captions, there is no previous and next button. What he is doing is using a widget here from Ali Pordelli. So this is the in and out widget. I've got that navigation element here. So this is just a separate widget that allows you to hide and show the navigation. Pretty much a trigger target widget and or a composition widget that has transitions applied to it so that it has that kind of smooth roll out and roll back. We can kind of take a look at that. If we bring this guy out, let's just take a look at this bits here. And it's filling up the screen. If you come and look at the design though, it's pretty tricky. Let's go back here. We've got the master page for home, and it's an individual page. It's only used once, but then every other page, the main master here, is used on 1, 2, 3, 4 different designs. So it feels as though these are separate pages, but you'll notice it's one master that then has the overlays. Here's the About Us overlay. Here's the blog and newsletter overlay, send us files, and then in this page, simply just a tabbed panel that allows you to come on in and transition between the two. So the beauty of this structure, the thing you want to keep in mind is that the Muse engine, when you place content, we're going to analyze what you've done and we're going to try to optimize images as much as possible. So even if you were to place this slideshow on every single page, Muse is going to look at the images that are used on those pages and they'll optimize them. So they'll try to minimize the amount of time you need to upload it to your hosting platform and the amount of time that people that view your website have to download all of the images. So if it reoccurs across multiple pages, if it's only one instance in the master, it's fine. If you replace it, we're still going to notice that the image does not change and upload and have the viewers download it only once accordingly. All right, so that's kind of the vanilla built-in slideshow stuff. I want to step into some of the widgets that are out there in the world. Am I using a state button, says Abhishek. And you're probably bailing me out of where I was a little earlier. I wasn't using a state button, Mr. Abhishek, because it makes me have to think hard. But let's play together, because that's what jam sessions are for. So if I come back to here, I'm assuming Abhishek's trying to help me have my rollover states here. This is a trigger and a target. Let's say I want to go back to that funny thing I was trying to do. I'm going to come in and strip things down a little bit to make life simpler. So we have a trigger as we know it. If I click here, there's the other trigger. In the trigger, I can nest elements. So I'm going to make this guy bigger, and I'm going to trust Abhishek for a moment because he's a smart man. And I'm going to come on in and get my image again. In fact, what I'm going to do is go get the widget that he's mentioning. So in the widget library, under buttons, we have something called a state button. And let me explain really quickly how state buttons, I don't have time to explain how state buttons work. But what it says is state buttons are containers that will unify the states of all objects inside of them. So in theory, without much time, I'm going to go grab my image, and I'm going to press and drag it into place, badly and quickly. Then I'm going to come on in and create a container here. In fact, I'm just going to come on in, have my text be hello world, give it that not so wonderful typeface that makes me happy. I'll kind of make it a little larger. I'm going to center it up. I could put some space below it, but we're in too much of a rush, so I'm going to fake it here badly. For this object, what I want to have happen, and Abhishek the question is, how do you make the type go away in this hello world scenario? So if I were to use a states button, if I come in and look at my states, I've got normal, rollover. Let's do this so that we can see what I'm doing here. In my normal state, there's nothing. In the rollover state, I want to go ahead and fill with white, and I want to set it transparent, which is swell. So notice in normal there's nothing, in rollover there's something, but here's the challenge back to you, oh dueling banjo Abhishek. How do I make the text go away in the normal state? So if I come in and place this now into my thumbnail, and we look at, because this is the states panel, I've got my thumbnail in the background and that stays constant, but notice that in my rollover state, I'm getting that background fill. So that's leading us in the right direction, but I will leave that at that unless Abhishek wants to correct me around how to make that text go away in the normal state. We might have even stumped the engineer. Maybe not. He's probably scratching his head. Okay, we got some other stuff to look at. I have given you examples of a few widgets that are out there that make life interestingly more fun. The free widget of the week, which will be available until noon, so about an hour and 15 minutes from now, it will no longer be free. It will be, I believe, $9, is a fun one. So let's go in and take a look at that. This is from Muse Grid. Let's see. And it's called Gallery FX. I'm going to press and drag this on the canvas. This uses a combination of 2 bits of magic. Okay, so I just drag that onto the canvas. Let's make these guys go away. Get them out of my way. What you'll notice, I drag that on the canvas. I've got one object, and then I've got this second little bit of magic. So if you're new to Muse, the world of widgets is one where it's extensible in the community. Those people in the community can make custom components that allow them to inject custom JavaScript, CSS, some HTML code, and they deliver that to you by way of a widget. So this is the free widget this week. You'll notice I can come into the main slideshow. This is the slideshow you and I have been looking at. If I come in and want to add my own images, I just come in and add them. They're added as thumbnails in the design. Remember that these are thumbnails, so I can always go and delete the ones I don't want and strip it down to the ones I've just added or a set that I'm comfortable with. So I'm going to configure the slideshow as I normally would. And then here's the magic. I'm going to come into the musegrid.com effects options, and I can come in and just play a little bit. I might want to have a little bit of tilt here to my thumbnail, so it's going to use a nice effect. If I come in and preview in the browser, there's my thumbnail set, but notice as I roll over it, it's got a little wonky grayscale background here that I can get rid of, but it also allows me to come in and preview that object too in full screen. So let's come in and look at that. If I select this guy, see how when I select one of my objects, as long as I have edit together checked, I can come in and change that fill, that background fill, to be transparent. So I'm going to turn off the gray now. Let's look at it one more time because I've got a white background. Looks like it's still kind of there. Might need a little fiddling. Let's try that one more time. So fill set to none. Let's try it at a group level. It's not there. Let's try it in the widget here. It's not there. Let's try it through here. Is everybody dizzy yet? I had this going last night. The nice part about the widget is that it comes with instruction. Let's try to set it not to none, but to white. So there's my slideshow. I'm still getting some grays here, so I need a little fiddling there. But it allows you to apply different effects. So it just has some nice custom animations that Muse does not offer. And I encourage you to kind of play around with that a little bit. Some other little ones that I thought were worth mentioning. Let's go ahead and close this site out. Let's see, the before and after widget. There are a number of these. I tend to have Ali Pordelli from Cookies image wrapper handy, so I'm going to press and drag this on the canvas. And this is great if you're trying to show design before and after, architectural before and after. What you can do is basically come in and place the container on the canvas. You can set its size. I'm going to go a little larger here. I'm going to go into those options, and I can select an image for before. So I also borrowed these from one of the Site of the Day. It's a blog that studies lighting here. So I'm going to grab after sunrise here, and I'm going to put it in the first position, and I'm going to grab another variation of that same sunrise and put it in the second position. Let's see if that worked for me. It did, but it's kind of an odd shape, so let's go in and change it. So what I've got, zoom out on this guy, just going to make it a little taller. So by default, I want to look at my image settings. I think it's scaled to fill the container. And notice that I can show before and after. So the clouds are changing, the ground is the same. They really align very nicely, which makes the world simple. If I just roll off here, it's going to bounce back to that center position. But this is a widget in the widget gallery called Image Wrapper that is available to show that before and after behavior. And there are about 5 before and after widgets from the community that are there. So in the links directory that I've given you, the resources for this session, I go into basically the widget gallery. Let's say Muse widgets. And if you just type gallery, there are a number of different widgets that are available for you. So the Gallery FX that I mentioned that's free today will usually be $9. Some others from other folks, but there is the image before and after gallery are here as well. I think there's one more that I wanted to show, and this is kind of a work in progress on my end. I'm working with a developer for some free giveaway widgets. I know I give myself trouble when I show these and they're not shipping yet, but it's called Carousel. I can press and drag this onto the canvas. And again, I've got some fly out options where I can come in and add some images. So, let's see. I'll look at this guy again. I'm even stumping myself one more time because that's just how I'm going to roll today. Let's look. I think I lost something that goes with that. Well, there's a second part to that I'm missing. And oh, look, we only have 10 minutes left, so I'm going to swing back to questions. There was a question at the beginning of the session that I'm actually going to try to save my day here and take a look at. So I was asked if this type of a gallery might be possible. This is a little tricky, and I'm not in love with this gallery, and I'm going to kind of show you why. So if we zoom out obscenely small, this is not built in Muse, but we were asked at the beginning of the session if this could be achieved in Muse. And it could, and if we think about it, it's really not incredibly hard. I've zoomed all the way out. So this is a very large page that has images that come along here. And if I go back to actual size, let's just show you the behavior. So as I come in, I can click, and if I click to the edge, notice that I get to the end. If I come over here and I click, it just kind of keeps going. And what I would suggest is you could achieve something similar to this. Notice all this navigation stays put. So I'm going to do an incredible quick, just bad comp of this to show the idea. I'm just going to steal this header. As soon as demo gods want to be kind to me here. I'm going to steal this header. And I'm going to copy it real quick. Come into Muse, let's go to a blank page. And let's just put it there in place, terrible as it is. I'm going to center it in my design, so I'm going to pin it right there up at the top. And then I'm going to start to work with some images. And for this, I'm just going to give myself a really quick break. So let's grab these images. And I just want to press and drag them into position here. And you'll notice these are of varying original size. It's kind of great for the type of carousel, or not carousel, but the type of design gallery that we're looking at. I'm even going to make this one kind of extremely smaller. And then to exaggerate our point a little bit, I'm going to come in and make my page really wide. So let's say we do, for this instance, we're going to do 2,000 pixels wide. I've still got my centered navigation pretty much. Just make sure it's centered on the site. I'm going to grope around until I see the middle with my smart guides. And I'm going to let these guys get a little bigger, make my life a little easier. And I'm going to duplicate them for the sake of time. All right, now here's the interesting slash fun slash odd behavior we can take here. I can even come in, whoops. Come on, demo gods, be kind to me today. I really have been a good girl. Okay, let's get these guys roughly centered and in position. What you want to do is think about anchor tags. So let's say this is, and I don't want to drive myself crazy for a second. I'm going to come in, I'm going to bring up the anchor tool. So I typed A on the keyboard, or I would click on the anchor icon here. And I'm just going to drop some anchors here. I'm going to call this one 1, or not, because the demo gods don't want me to. 1. I'm going to do another one. I'm going to call it 2. Another one, call it 3. And I'm going to put them into position here. All right. Now, I'm just telling you how I would do this. I'm making it up as we go along. I'm going to do another one here and call it -1. Really? Tell me what's wrong with that. 1 neg. Seriously? How about neg1? And I'm going to put it here. Running out of time. Let's do one more. We're going to call it neg2. All right, are you ready for the magic? So what I would do at that point, hope this works, I've never tried it. I'm going to now create a little container here, because if you notice, they kind of have hot spots. And this container is going to link to neg2, right? And then this container is simply going to link to neg1. I think you're getting the gist. This container is going to go to neg, or just the word 1. Let's see this a little bit more. And this guy is going to go back. So what happens with anchors is anchors will move the active screen until the anchor is visible. It takes a little playing with to kind of figure that out. But once you kind of understand, an anchor is going to want to move until the object is in screen. Let's try this one for 2 and see if what I've done actually works. All right, I'm going to preview it in the browser. Let's go ahead and even zoom in a little tighter to kind of illustrate the idea. So I now am here on this landing page. Now if I swipe back and forth, I can see things going on here. But what I want to do is kind of click, and it's going to move until my objects start to come into view. So I'm sort of simulating that behavior. I only did so many anchors, but as you work, it's going to keep taking you in the next direction. See how it's moving you forward and backwards? So that's how I would do it if you ask me. How is that? We'll end in a high note. Yes. So I'm trying to look at what Bob has written. I've missed a bit of a prezo, but I wish you could have one large hero image in the slideshow and just a short row of thumbs, maybe 5. The rest would be hidden with a left and right arrow. This is absolutely common and possible using the container widget And with 3 minutes left, I'm going to give that one a go. Oh, but look at all these questions, man. How would you use in-browser editing with the gallery? You really cannot edit slideshows yet. You can do trigger targets, so composition slideshows can be edited using in-browser editing. You would have to edit the thumbnail and the hero separately. Slideshows, I don't believe we have that tied up yet. All right, I'm going to give Bob's little question a go real quick. So let's try this one, and then we're going to call it a day. Let's go with a new piece of paper. All right, because this is fun and interesting, and I think I can pull it off quickly. What I want to do, she said, thinking to herself, you do need trigger targets. You cannot do it with just slideshows. So let's go on in. I'm going to grab a blank composition because I want to do this really fast. Clear all styling, clear all widget content. Let's grab that image. So I'm going to fill it here. Let's do it the other way, scale to fill. And let's do it here. Well, I'm thinking to myself, I'll make you a deal, Bob. If you go ahead and look in the widget gallery, there are examples of this that you can download and try from the gallery. You may have to pay a couple bucks, but it's a common pattern. What I've seen is you create a composition widget, right, that has the previous and next buttons, and then in there you have the thumbnails, and based on which set you're resolving to, it's going to take you to the next level. There are about 15 examples, maybe only 5, but a lot in the widget directory. All right, we've eaten up a whole hour again. Next week's session is for Muse noobs, and it is Muse 101, how to build your first basic site in Muse. We tend to have to do it every couple months, so I'm going to put that up there. Please let me know topics you'd like to see covered. There is a company called Equid. I always have to think because it's e-commerce widgets, but Equid is doing a lot of nice things with Muse. They'd like to have a session showing off e-commerce integration. So that's probably going to be the session week after next. I'm reading a little bit of the comments here. Thank you, Abhishek. That's correct. We will see you next week. Thank you, everyone, for your time. I'll hang out for questions in the chat once I go grab the recording link from Connect. Okay, I'll be back.